Um, Good afternoon, everyone. Phenomenally, I think this panel discussion of this topic is the mother of all topics, I would say. It should have been the topic number one, but um, really, it is. We live in interesting times, and starting with that in terms of the way uh, the way we move, the way we live, the way we interact and transact is changing. And something that is so fundamental that for the last 70 years, using the way we've used energy for mobility, or how we've generated electricity, how we've consumed that is itself changing, right? So on that note, really, to begin, my co-panelists here, um, and I'm just going to be asking some questions, and that's why I sat at this side of the table. Um, and I would like for all of you all I've got a list of topics that I want to cover. During each topic, we will allow actually 2 questions each, so that there is interaction during the panel discussion. Uh, We'd like to keep it as controversial as possible, so ask all the tough questions, and roast all of them a little bit. But that apart, I think the way we would like to do it is just introductions. So all of y'all, introducing yourselves, no more than 2 minutes, and what you do. Then the shift in landscape. How is this link between mobility and energy? How is that changing? And we have diverse experience here, and that'll be very, very interesting to know everything from generation, distribution, storage, and the mobility aspect. The adoption rates, the government has some very, very ambitious targets. In your opinions, which sector is going to move quickly? How does that move? And how will that, how can we accelerate that? And last but not the least, really, since there are so many OEMs here, Professor himself who's been the catalyst in this whole thing, constructing an EV, will the construct, or, because an EV is that much more modular as compared to an IC engine vehicle, and with mobility as a service coming in, do you guys see the construct of an EV being very different from the way an IC engine is constructed? So let's go through that. So first of all, introductions.
Thanks, Sanjay. Hi, this is Ajay from Sun Mobility. So just give you a couple of minutes of background about who we are as a company. See, Sun Mobility is in the energy infrastructure space for electric mobility. We are founded based on a simple premise that not just the automotive industry, but also the energy industry is going to go through a major disruption due to rise of electric mobility. So while there's a lot of focus on vehicles, batteries, but we kind of forget what's going to have the impact on the oil side, energy side. How do we power these vehicles? Just to give you a context, the transportation fuel consumption in India is worth about $120 billion today, expected to rise to about $200 billion, $250 billion in the next 10, 15 years. So that's a huge area and a huge market that's undergoing to go through disruption. So Sun Mobility is in the energy infrastructure space for mobility, and we plan to offer batteries as a service using battery swapping. Right? Battery swapping to us is a means to an end of providing energy plus battery as a service to consumers, which has the benefit of providing them lower cost of entry into the electric mobility space, as well as not having to worry about the management of the battery, what does it cost, how much life does it have, what technology do we have. We cannot take all of that hard work away from the customer and essentially provide battery plus energy as a service to the customer. That's sort of the essence of Sun Mobility. Thanks.
Hi, Abhishek this side from SoftBank Energy. SoftBank Energy is a subsidiary, energy subsidiary of SoftBank parent. We are not only investing, but we also want to create our own infrastructure. And when I talk about infrastructure, it's about energy and mobility infrastructure. Both are very, very closely linked industries. To go a bit further, everything needs energy. If I were to drive through investment or by myself an autonomous, connected, shared, and electric ecosystem, I need energy. So from a global point of view, and I'll come back to India as well, we're trying to create a lot of assets, renewable energy assets. Renewable energy primarily because we believe that's the way to go. The costs of renewable energy, especially solar, have come down significantly. Uh, Solar is more affordable than our conventional power, coal. India has got a big ambition. Prime Minister Modi, 100 gigawatts, probably all of you know the number. And thirdly, India is perhaps the best, and if not the best, the second best country in the world to have sunlight, great sunlight. So it makes sense to do solar, at least in India. But from a Asia perspective, we want to really create a lot of solar and wind plants, be it Mongolia, Russia, China, Japan, South Korea, and hopefully connect with the so-called concept called Asia Supergrid. Because when the sun sets in India, probably we could get electricity from wind in Mongolia. The wind starts blowing in Mongolia. So that's the big concept of energy, and we'll trying to map it with the mobility. We have partners, as you would know, in India, Ola, Southeast Asia Grab, and China Didi. We do aspire that they would participate in this mission, electric vehicle. And eventually we want to have this, we want to be the integral player when this energy and mobility ecosystem throughout Asia, and why only Asia, probably a larger chunk, when this ecosystem will be there. So our efforts are primarily based to create the ecosystem, to create the energy and mobility ecosystem. And our focus is Asia.
Yeah, I think my brief is actually there already, so I will just, on 2 sentences, I will just introduce myself. I'm an auto veteran, has worked with Tatas, General Motors, Toyotas, all the leading ones. So, and luckily or unluckily, I don't know, the people say the oil runs in my veins. So it's a big change for me when I see that oil to electric, and I'm a Formula One fan. So I think I'm only trying to understand how the Formula will run, Formula One, what the fans will do. So these are the type of the things which probably I would like to address, that how the things are going to change from the oil industry, oil-fueled automobiles to electric fueled, I think. And that's going to be a big change for all the old veterans of automobile lovers.
So talking about now coming to really the opening the conversation here, and please to ask questions and contribute to that and make it really a rich conversation is, this whole shift in landscape, right? And lots of vectors that even in your introductions that you pointed, one, whether it is, moving from ownership to ridership, whether it's moving from decentralized generation of energy, whether it's using renewables and the cost of renewables going down. So if each of you all could just touch upon the key vectors that are driving this change of electrification of mobility and driven by renewables, right? Just the top 5 vectors, and how do you see that impacting both globally and if there is any specificity to India, because in India has this whole huge amount of energy arbitrage between hydrocarbon and renewable. Ajay used to be the CEO of the renewable part of Tata's, and he's done a lot of that in the past. So, and as a corollary to this, my question: do you see energy prices ever hitting zero?
I don't think energy prices will ever hit zero. But in terms of your original question around various vectors, I think we are living in a world in which people are moving towards from a purchase-based economy to a service-based economy, right? We already starting to see that in various parts of the things that you and I already use, right? Which is computing has gone from people setting up their own servers to actually getting computing on the cloud or storage, telecom, mobility. A lot of people who would buy cars, rent cars by the day or by the month, right, are moved to using Ola and Uber and those kind of things. So we're used to getting access to things that we need on an as needed basis, pay as you go basis, rather than always committing capital up front and then using them over time. And I think that's a trend that's going to play a big role into the evolution of mobility space as well, where it will turn towards buying cars, buying batteries, setting up your own infrastructure, to actually renting it from a provider on a service basis, on an as-you-go basis. So I think that's how the one vector I would like to highlight. If you guys add some more.
And just to compliment him, a slightly different opinion. I think today we don't care about how much it charges to make a call. Probably once we have a great infrastructure, renewable energy infrastructure, renewable is already affordable than thermal. The problem is renewable is different. The cost of batteries hasn't come down so that I can make solar 24/7, but probably that would happen after 2020, not before that. So like we have this telecom, I think 25 years, 30 years ahead, given what Ajay mentioned, everything as a service, we're going to have a scenario when the electricity would be very, very readily and affordable, readily available and affordable. Obviously, I'm not talking about scenarios like, for example, you might question India, is there still a huge population of poor? Of course, I mean, we still have population that does not have mobile phone, telecom network. But what I want to say is, at least from a global level, I don't know when India would achieve that, from a global level, we do foresee that electricity prices would be extremely affordable. It would not be an important factor or a barrier.
Yeah, I think I would like to just cover around the topic what we are discussing today, and there are certain things which always troubles my mind when I talk about the electric vehicles, and 4 or 5 things. This is first is being driven by across the world. First is to address the pollution, obviously, which is one of the big factor as we are seeing now. A lot of work is happening on the green environment around the world. So that's, I think, one of the big factor which is driving this. But definitely, I think, as Ajay just mentioned, that the negative factors which you understand, I think, which I feel is going to be a big loss of revenue to government, and government need to address that, how they lose the money, because we all know that how they make these losses. Because I understand that right now, the oil is one of the biggest contributor to government taxes, oil industry as such. So that's going to be the big loss, because Ajay has just mentioned some figures of 100 billion odd oil or petroleum products which are being used in the mobility, and this is a huge, government has a huge revenue coming from that. So I think this is something which probably will impact the economies worldwide. A lot of economies in worldwide will get disturbed, especially all the OECD countries and all that we are talking about. There's already the impact going on that side. On the negative side, on the oil prices, we have all seen that. So I think that's one of the negative things which is going to happen here. That the whole infrastructure which has been set by the automobile companies over the years will go for a sea change. So I feel a huge joblessness is going to be there. Job losses will be to a tune of what I understand in India itself should be around 30 to 50 million in the period of 8 to 10 years as we move to full electric vehicles. Because there will be not much need of the dealers. There will be a lot of selling through the e-commerce, the electric vehicles. There will not be a lot of service requirement. A lot of part shop will close the shops. A lot of automotive component manufacturers will close the shop. Yes, there will be some investments coming in the electric side of the vehicles, starters, converters, and all that, charging stations. But there will be a huge loss of the existing business, what I'm talking about, the existing skill sets of the people what we have. So there will be a huge job losses, and this has to be addressed at some point of time by Government of India by reskilling or by redeployments and all that. That's on the negative sides. And auto component manufacturing, which will again I'm talking about, is around 60 to 70% of the auto components will get affected because of the change in the powertrain technologies completely. Battery manufacturing definitely I think will be a positive flip on that. Swapping, which Ajay has taken the bet, I think is one of the best bet to be in. Right, so that's going to grow leaps and bounds, I will say rather. It's going to be future for the business as we go further. Steel industry may have a negative impact too in India or globally also, because a lot of things will move to composites over the period as we see that in the automobiles, already the composites are coming in, and the composites will take a maximum share of things to make the vehicle as lighter as possible, so that the batteries can run more efficiently, they can give more charge of kilometers, they can run more kilometers on one charge. So this is going to change a lot. So, and Ajay has already touched on the personal mobility versus shared mobility. I think that's a phenomena which is going to change a lot, that shared mobility, as they are predicting in 2030 onwards in developed countries, that the personal buying on the cars and automobiles will reduce substantially and it will be all about the shared mobility which will be taking over. So I think that will reduce. So I think that all I think is that one of the predictions is that all the electric cars and technologies will be like Google, Apple, or the new tech companies which are emerging now, whether it is India and outside. And all the automobile makers, 80% will close their shops worldwide. So you can understand that what's going to happen. How the world order is going to change is going to be seen like the cameras or like the other phones. And
I had asked one question.
yeah. Dynamics, I'm talking about how the dynamics are going to change.
But there,
I want to add one.
no, go on.
See, I'm taking Abhishek's and your comment together, right? Whenever there is change, there's always this fear mongering around, what if that happens, what if that happens? But the reality is, we live in a world of change, right? And change has always sort of driven the economy, the revenues, taxation to greater heights, right? I remember the early days of the telecom revolution, where, like Abhishek was saying, the cost of voice calls kept dropping. And there was this fear on what's going to happen to the telecom companies. But then as smartphones came around 10 years ago, right? Let's sort of remember this 2017, an iPhone was launched in 2007. The smartphone revolution is less than 10 years old. And even over these 10 years, the amount of data that is going through the telecoms networks has exponentially increased. So whatever revenue losses they had on the long distance calling has more than well covered up through the data traffic and how much they charge for data. Each of you look at their phone bill, you're paying more for data than you're paying for voice. So yes, they lost theoretically revenue for voice, but they made it up in data. So same thing will happen in a lot of these other industries also. They will change and evolve, right? And that's what we all do as humans. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just the way that it is. And the sooner we understand that, and we see where the jobs are going to be, where the revenue is going to be, where the taxation is going to be. And I think our government that way is very progressive, and they're making a bet on that. And I don't think that's something to be squared out. That's something to be welcomed and something to be embraced and then run towards.
Okay. So, if I were to just split this amongst you all, where there's an energy expertise and there is a automotive expertise as well here. So let's start with the energy side. We know how this whole centralized generation of energy, this Edisonian thing of, everything needs to be, all the energy needs to be developed, generated centrally, that myth is bursting over a period of time in which every individual or every household can be potentially a generator of energy. So from that to distribution or storage and consumption, especially from both of you who are, investing more and more money, time, and your own personal pedigree comes from this energy space. Give us a little bit of, for the sake of the audience, for India, and anecdotes in the world, examples that you can give where certain things are already happening, of how this decoupling of generation, consumption with storage, using renewables, XYZ, will happen. And what does that mean for all of us?
I think there's a lot in that question. I'll try to address it the way I think I understand it. See, I think the one fundamental conceptual things for all of us to realize is, you keep hearing all these headlines about how cost of generation of solar power has dropped. Latest tenders are at 244 and everything. I don't think any of our bills have actually gone down. So not that I can see, right? So there is a fundamental difference between cost of generation and the cost at the point of consumption. There is always, leakages, losses, margins, distribution costs that come into play. So what is happening is there are distributed sources of energy, whether it is solar, whether it's micro turbines, whether it's fuel cells, which are starting to become more and more prevalent in the market, because there is still a significant gap between generation and actual consumption point where there gives an opportunity. Last time I checked, my electricity bill was still 7-8 rupees. Most of us who run businesses and factories pay somewhere around 10-12 rupees, if not more, depending on the part of the country. So what has happened is these distributed energy sources, most importantly, distributed solar has become a big part of your energy generation equation. And the good effect of that is it's going to start putting a ceiling as to how much leakage happens from during the transmission phase, and it'll start bring the actual prices down, and it will start a lot of the innovators in the audience to start thinking about how can I generate my own power rather than always relying on the grid. So I think that's going to lead to a lot of innovation and disruption in that space as well. Right now, we've seen that in the generation space, but not really in the transmission and the distribution space. So that's sort of my 2 cents.
So on the distributed, I back what he said. And it means that, for example, all the audience in Delhi, let's say you all are driving electric vehicles, and it could be very well your example. I could build a dedicated solar plant just for you, and under an open access mechanism or similar architecture, if I could give you the electricity for 2 rupees 50 paisa, or let's say 3 rupees, at some little bit of cost. So the consumption, the end user cost is eventually going to go low. It's the way ahead. The only reason why we are still paying heavy charges is because solar contribution is very, very low, 1%, 2%. As and when we keep doing big plants, utility scale plants, the contribution of solar in the total electricity mix would be much higher. And there will be a stage when the tipping has to come. It could never be like 8 rupees or 7 rupees like you are paying. It has to go down. It's just that it hasn't gone down because solar contribution is very low, 1.5%. So one of the very good strategy in India is to build massive solar plants, which I think SoftBank Energy is doing, and other great players are doing. I mean, you know the names. So that would happen. At what pace it happens, it depends how fast the industry and the government can do the stuff.
Okay. Great. The other point, I mean,
And sorry to interrupt. So that would happen, renewables. And that's why EVs also make sense eventually, because the cost of power will go down. The bottleneck is only batteries. We'll talk about that later.
Sure. Thank you. Now coming to the auto part, right? And if you see an EV is nothing but like a mobile phone with wheels, if I can use that, illustrate that as an example. So from you spoke about job losses and the doomsday kind of thing that that you predicted, but let's leave that for a moment aside, right? And we'll come to that as part of the next set of questions, topics to be covered, and which is a very, very valid concern for ACMA and stuff like that, because they're one of the largest employers in India. But from a construct of the vehicle, or the kind of skills that are required, what would be the new set of skills that are required, let's say, that are not there today in a OEM? Because you spoke a lot about how the cars will get sold differently, made differently, XYZ. So at the top of your head, how will an OEM change, and what needs to be changed there?
As we know that right now, first thing is very, very clear that scale of economies should help India and China, these two countries, to tilt the balance in their favor for Make in India types, right? How we take the advantage of it worldwide is yet to be seen, because China has taken around 10 to 20 years leap on us. And still I feel, and a lot of panelists I have heard today, that lithium ion still will be coming from there only, will be packaging and battery packs and all that stuff only. So a lot of things has to be developed on that side, I feel so. So the lot of manufacturing, as you are talking about, in the assembly lines will shrink drastically, because I feel like example is like 20 million car market if we predict for India for next 8 or 9 years, with the shared mobility should go down substantially. That should go down substantially. That's the way I looked into it. Because the new generation, as Ajay has clearly mentioned, it's all about service, it's not about owning. So when we talk about apartments, when we talk about housing or anything, it will go down with the new generation a lot, because they don't mind now not owning. Like example is a lot of new guys into the tech platforms you see, they are hiring the furnitures, which we have never thought about it. And that's, some of the tech companies are doing pretty good on that. Like they say that we are hiring the furniture 6 months and we change it after 6 months, we get something new. So that trend is developing. So you will see a lot of plants shrinking in the assembly lines and all. Obviously, which the components you need, the big assembly lines, the powertrains has to close down. The powertrains will be, basically there's not much on the powertrains here. So that technology will change, totally evolving. The press plants and all that, I feel so will again change, the press shops and all that, because a lot of composites will start coming in. So to make the cars and automobiles lighter. And when composites comes, it's more of a other fabrication shops and other things which you require. So that will shrink. So a lot of plants will shrink. A lot of capacities will lie idle. They have to convert into to use something else, real assets and all that. But that's what going to change the whole industry. And the battery manufacturing, as we were talking about, yes, that will increase in India if the scale of economy helps. The converters, the chargers, all that supporting infrastructure, whatever is required for the electric vehicles will increase, but it's only 18 moving parts or let's say max 25, 30 moving parts. So things will go and this car.
So just as just taking off from what you were saying, if fundamentally, let's assume, and Professor, if you can also weigh in on this.
Professor, I think has left.
Is that, no.
No, oh, yeah.
No, on the question that I'm saying, if fundamentally the EV is easier to make than IC engine, right, is what you're saying, right?
Assembling, I will rather say the assembling is very good to make. The whole challenge in the EV is getting lithium iron as lighter and as affordable.
Correct. Let's leave the battery part, but assuming that there are, you have, like in any other scenario, you have the choice of buying battery from him or you, and you choose the best battery and whatever. But fundamentally, an EV is easier to put together as compared to an IC engine. So do you, just to get opinions, and your personal opinions may not be opinions of your companies, do you think that in each of your opinions, you will see a new breed of OEMs in India?
I think that's already there. JSW Energy, which is, you have never heard about auto, they are into auto now. They're putting up a big plant of EVs in Gujarat. You must have heard about it. I think a lot of news was there. Ajay may be knowing a little bit more because he is actually linking with a lot of companies, maybe in the battery swapping. But there's a total new breed. E-rickshaws, I meet somebody across somewhere in any meeting, he says, I'm launching e-rickshaws or I'm already in e-rickshaws. There are almost, I think, 25, 30 manufacturers of e-rickshaw in India. Two-wheelers, you will be surprised in India, there will be 80 or 90 EV coming in. Right? Because it's very easy to put all together. Import something from China, import something, and then start going ahead. So I think it's all depend on what the safety regulations will come, what all the things will come. Because e-rickshaw, that does not follow any damn safety regulations. Right? They are one of the worst vehicle to actually be in, if you ask me. Because you are so exposed that when you die at any freak accident, that guy is driving that e-rickshaw, you never know. So these type of things, probably regulations will set in, and then the real players will start emerging and developing all that.
E-rickshaw is still a rudimentary. Lead acid can work. For two-wheelers, three-wheelers, yes. New players will come in. Probably we have a lot guys, young guys sitting, doing startups to kill the conventional industry. For four-wheeler, it might take a time in this geography. We haven't 100% accepted the standardization of batteries, cars, concept yet. So obviously, I think for some time, Mahindra's, Tata's would play a game. For an EV, like he mentioned, it has 1,500 parts as compared to the ICE, which is 20,000 parts. So an EV essentially is a battery game. It has a motor and a battery, that's it. It becomes difficult for an OEM, conventional OEM, to start swapping, although I would love to see that happening, but the Tatas and Mahindras probably would find it very difficult to accept.
Yeah, no, I just want to add what you just told.
So four-wheelers will stay for some time, but other segments?
What I'm saying that the ease of entry to this space will become much, much easier. It's all about basically where you buy the components, from where you get the batteries, put the things on the place, and then roll it out. So I think what he's talking about, the young entrepreneurs, I'm also working for a company which is already working on e-wheeler, two-wheeler and three-wheeler actually commercial applications for EV, which is almost on prototype stage. So it's all about, like, as he's talked about, 2,000 versus 20,000. So that's whole summarizes the whole game, that there will be a lot of players which will be coming in, and new players, as you are rightly saying.
If you talk about long term, when battery would also become commodity, the software could play a very integral role. That's why Google, Apple, everyone is making car.
Yeah.
See, I'll just nuance, I think, what you're saying in a different way, right? I think a lot of product innovation may come from new companies, right? Take a classic example of Reva, which Chetan Mani founded, right? It was an innovative product. He formed it in a small company, scaled up to a certain level. But once you go beyond that, you will find that the established incumbents, whether it's Mahindra or Tata or Toyota or Suzuki, will end up probably acquiring them and absorbing them because there's a certain value in the brand and the distribution and the service that is very hard to replicate for a startup. So I think you will see a lot of product innovation that will happen in a distributed manner, new technologies, new products, whether it's JSW or others. But when it comes to really scaling up, you will start to see the consolidation. You take Tesla, which gets a lot of hype, but the numbers that it has today are really, really minuscule, right? So I think we have to kind of nuance our thinking around that.
That's a very valid. That's absolutely a very valid point. And you know, even on the quality aspect that you mentioned, and I think as this bar gets real and set, making a car is easy, but making a quality car or car that has more area under the curve and gives you the million miles, you know, under it is absolutely difficult, and especially for commercial applications. I think the need for the owner of the vehicle or owner of the fleet to have a reliable product that runs for those million kilometers would be very essential. Great. So as an allied point and as a natural segue into this, and this is just one, you know, your personal views is adoption rates. You know, we have this whole, you know, government's goal of converting, you know, everything to EVs by 2030. By 2020, okay, 10 years away, before whatever goal, that is in the next 3 years. If I can just have each of your opinions on the number of vehicles that would be electrified by then, just whatever.
So I don't think I can hazard a guess on the actual numbers, but I'm sort of a big believer in this common concept of, look, there's a hype cycle. Right now, we are sitting in the early stages of the hype cycle. There's a lot of hype around electric vehicles. Government is, you know, creating a lot of push. But I think sooner or later, hopefully in the next few months or next few years, there is going to be a bit of a disillusionment. And that's after that is when really you'll start seeing a realistic, sustainable scale-up. Because I think a lot of the scale-up that is happening today, to me, seems to be a lot of hype without a lot of without really substance behind it. So hard to hazard a guess.
I think next 3 years, so I'll give you the number. Although you can see from several reports, next 3 years we're still going to debate. By 2020, I think four-wheelers, so I'll divide four-wheelers and three-wheelers, two-wheelers. I don't know about e-rickshaws, but four-wheelers, I think less than 1 lakh, not more than that. We still are struggling with battery prices. The three-wheeler and two-wheeler just multiplied by 4, so I would say total 500,000. But more important is by 2020, what can you do? If we together, and we together mean if government and private, if we can do a couple of things, I think those couple of things are very important. Invest in gigafactories, domestic gigafactories, make battery manufacturing here. Don't get stuff from China or outside. And if the country can think about procuring the raw materials, because your lithium and cobalt is the new oil. 100 years back when oil started, Industrial Revolution started, Middle East became rich because they had oil, and oil was applied to every transport. And it's very likely lithium or cobalt, such raw materials would eventually replace oil. So if it's a national security issue, it's an energy security issue. If you can't focus on procuring your raw materials, I mean, it probably could be difficult. And then this is upstream. And if you see the middleman, battery manufacturing, it creates a lot of jobs. It creates a lot of IPs, domestic IPs. So it's a good thing to do. We focused on import-based strategy when the mobile phone revolution started, but that was a different reason. We can't afford to only focus on imports. So this middleman needs to be thought, and we need to focus on upstream, securing the raw materials.
Okay. Sanjeev?
I think he is not on the numbers, so I will not say that his numbers can be disputed. What he
if
has
we can do these
predicted
two things,
is
then I can give you
more or
20, 30
less
number.
the same figures what I talk about, but I think these numbers are still on the optimistic side from my perspective, because a lot will depend on the infrastructure which is going to come in. So, and I don't think so that infrastructure is going to develop that fast on the charging stations and all that, because we have already, before this panel, we have seen Tata Power and NTPC guys talking about that almost no to it. Like that was coming in their things. So the point is that infrastructure, which is going to command a lot of things, but the German guy who was on that same panel, he told that, and he has told that disruptive technologies, which is happening in Germany, which if that evolves, that solar panel in your house charges your car in the night, and then you are done.
But that
And then
these
you
guys are
sell
doing
that.
it as part of their
So-
today rooftop solar
So
business.
that
Yeah.
will be
Nothing so
like one of the
disruptive.
disruptive technologies which comes in. I think that will help us to grow the electric vehicles in much,
No,
much
sure.
bigger number.
I think rooftop will be slower, but if utility could be big, I think the battery infrastructure that Ajay will build, I can't give fast charger or chargers to every house, and I still need all the EVs. So, and my country is going to survive on fossil fuels for next 2 to 3 decades. So what's the way to still charge your EV by renewables? That's where Ajay come into play. He will innovate in terms of business model, the swapping, and we can have a dedicated solar plant that could be fed, that could feed electricity, affordable electricity in like these 3-4 hubs. So
Okay. So are we done?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think.
So I guess that's it. Now we have Mantri ji coming in, right? Is he? Oh, that's it? Oh. Okay, chalo. So we are done. Yeah, I guess
Let's
that's
have a
it.
huge round of applause for our eminent panelist and moderator for this panel discussion.